Hi everyone, George here from Locked On Art, and welcome to part 2 of my Marder 3 build. In the last video I started out with the interior, building the engine and the transmission and fleshing a lot of it out with some scratch built parts. If you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you go and check it out. A link will be in the description. And moving on, I'm going to start with the fighting compartment, and as you can see here on the interior of the armour walls, it's very poorly made. There's some very large, ugly ejection pin marks. The ammo racks have been built into the wall, and there's just virtually no other detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove everything, sand it all back, and then I'm going to rebuild the whole interior from scratch. So I've cleaned those parts out, and what I want to do now is add the brackets that held the armour plates together. And what I've done is I've drawn up a wee template and then stuck it to some brass sheet, and I can cut that out of brass sheet all as one piece, and that way nothing will be overlapping. So I've got my two templates now, and I'm just scoring them where I need to fold it. So that should fit nicely in here now. And it does. So I'll get that glued in. Now I've left a little gap at the top there because the top portion needs to be flush with the bottom parts. So for this left side, everything I've scratch built. I've made a conduit for the junction box. I'm going to be mounting an MP40 up here. Just going to drill out a wee hole here for the antenna wire. So I've made a wee ammo rack, just using the same method as for the brackets. Made a wee template and cut it out with brass sheet, as well as a ammo pouch, just jerry-rigged together with some old parts. So this is one of the connection boxes for the antenna. So for the right side panel, it's a wee bit more involved. I've also made the ammo rack for this one, and there's quite a lot of parts for the radio. I've got the radio mounting bracket, the radio itself, and there's a comms box. that will sit above it. Now this connection box, I'm going to take that off and move it over here, and then I can run the tubes, the conduit tubes for the wires. I'm going to make a transformer for the 12 volt battery that's going to sit on the bottom shelf. That's going to connect to the radio power. Then I'm going to have two wires coming off here into the comms box. This is where the antenna lead goes, and then that'll loop around. I've also got a lead coming out of the top of here that's going to go down and go around to the left side and connect up to that junction box. So there's quite a lot of work involved with drilling and wiring. So what I've decided to start with is the wiring and the plugs. So I've got to make about 5 of these basic plugs. And the way I made these is I just used the number tabs off the sprue, drilled a couple of holes into it, fitted the wire, and now I've sanded around it just to get the size right. And for the transformer box, I'm just using these few bits of styrene for the body. So I have pretty much everything I need for this side, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick it all together. This is one of the connection boxes for the antenna. Now I can install the antenna wire. Now the wire for the comms extension. And then lastly, the 2 extensions for the throat mic and the headphones. So this is the power lead that goes to the transformer, and then from there it goes to the vehicle's battery. And this cable here will go off down to the battery. Now there's a row of bolts here on the front plate, and the reason for that, there was a beam bolted to the inside of the armour. That detail has been missed out of this model, so I've created my own, just with the same method as the brackets, just using brush sheet. And that was applied to both sides. With that all finished off, it's time to add the nut detailing on the inside of the brackets. And for this I'm using this sheet of nuts and bolts from Ming Models. And it's worth noting, with the original model, that detail was also left out. So that's how it's looking now. All the nuts have been installed. And now it's time to move on to the front of the armour plate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these moulded on loops and replace them with some photo etch ones. Now I'm going to be using these photo etch loops, and also included was a template for where to drill the holes. And for the holes themselves I'm using number 80 drill bits. I'm just going to stick the template down with a little bit of tape. Now this piece here, the handlebar that goes along the top, is actually snapped in half. So I'm just going to make a new one with brass rod. Now for the handlebar along the top, I've just glued this one back together and I'm just using it sort of as a guide. I'm going to be using this brass rod instead. So I'm just going to bend it around this lid here just to get the rounded shape. So that's looking about right now. And for the two pieces at the end, they come up at right angles. I found that quite tricky to bend those. But what I did is I measured these 2 points here, which is 3.5 centimeters. So I'll just line them up with those 2 points. Then I'm going to pull those two ends just straight up. And now it's looking very close to the original. So now I'm going to make up one of the external storage racks, which goes on the side of the armor plate. So what I'm going to do with the main two cage parts is I'm going to solder them together. We'll just give it a stronger bond. So that's how it's looking after it's been sanded, and it's one strong solid piece now. Now for the periscopes, the bracket is quite thick and it is missing that swivel beam across here, so I've decided to make my own. I've scored out the brackets on this brass sheet. I just need to drill some holes and cut them out. I'm just making some indents with a pin before I drill the hole. I'm just repurposing these belts for the arms on the mechanism for the periscopes, simply because the holes are already there and all I have to do is widen them a wee bit. and putting on a wee end connector there as well. So I've drilled a couple of holes into the periscope and inserted some pins, and that will let me attach the mechanism. Now I have a fully working periscope. So I'm just adding a couple of supports here which would have allowed the periscope to be bolted to the armor plate. So for the periscopes that pop up through the roof, it's the same deal. I'm just installing some blocks for it to be bolted on. So I'm going to glue the plates together now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack them in place with a bit of super glue and then use Tamiya's extra thin just to seal it all up. This is how it's looking from the back view. Now with that as it is, I'm going to move on to the main gun. And they have provided an aluminium barrel for this one. And there are 3 different muzzle brakes included. I'm going with the early rounded one. There's a couple of plastic rods that go into the slide here, and I'm going to replace those with some metal ones. I think it's quite a clever design from Dragon to be able to move the gun up and down using the pistons. So with the gun shield here, I'm going to add a few details in the back here. And this collar was actually made of two pieces and it was bolted together. So I'm going to add that detail as well. The gun was attached to the shield via some steel struts. There were 6 of them in total, and they were welded to these positions here. And I'm using 0.5mm brass rods in place of the plastic ones. So with all the struts in place now, that's the gun finished, and I'm very pleased with how it came out. So that's probably as much detail as you can handle in one video. So what I think I'll do is I'll put the model together as I have it, just so you guys can see the progress, and then that will be it until part 3. So that's how she's looking at the moment. And I think just with this video is probably the most detail I've ever put into a model. There's quite a few moving parts in there, and a heap of scratch built parts too. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Also, please visit me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And I also have my own website, lockedonart.com, where I have an exclusive blog detailing my builds and also sharing content and videos not seen anywhere else. So do consider subscribing to the blog, where you'll be up to date and informed first. So thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in part 3.